Hi, I'm Dex Gelfand, spiritual healer, creator of therapeutic spiritual counseling, Sessions with Dex, and the first of several books to be published, Honoring Your Spiritual Compass. I'm going to explain something to you which people sometimes have a problem understanding, and it's this. Everything you can ever experience, you create for yourself to experience it exactly in the way that you experience it. Whatever you experience in your life, you cause it. Why do you cause it? Well, it's because you desire to experience it. Now, I know many of you are reacting with, that's impossible, that's ridiculous. Why would I cause tragedy in my life? Why would I cause all this anxiety? Why would I cause this bad experience? Well, I'll tell you. See, we all have a collection of selves, of identities, personas. Take whatever word you're comfortable with. There are endless descriptions of these selves, personas, identities, valences, but they are superficial selves that we take on. We take these on to present ourselves in a certain way, to be regarded a certain way, to be responded to a certain way, and also the other situation of we get these selves projected onto us. Through relating with people, people impose or project onto you the you that they are creating you as being for their own purposes, to align with the identity that they're wearing, to have the exchange that they want, to get the response from others that they are seeking. And that's the game of relating to each other that we play through identities. Now, every identity that we have exists to get a specific reaction from a specific other type of identity. That's how the game is played. And each of these selves we imbue with our spiritual abilities to some degree. Every one of these identities can only experience those things that are within the parameters of that particular self. And one way we take on these selves is we identify with some tragic or painful experience, and you become the person who has this terrible thing happen. And you know what? Once you take this on, then you have to be able to display that type of terrible thing happening, because every self or identity is imbued with a strong urge to live, to exist, to continue, to be. And the only way it can be is to display the condition that defines that self that you have taken on. So when you're being the self that is treated unfairly by other people, that's what you're going to display. When you're being the self who is mistreated, who is deserted, abandoned, who can't trust people, whatever it might be, who is in pain, who always needs help, who always needs sympathy. How many people in your life, how many times have you seen someone who is always displaying, always telling the same story, different time, different place, different encounters with other people, but they're always telling you the same story of how somebody else treated them wrong in some way. And they can't explain why this keeps happening to them. Well, everybody, when you continually have the same kind of chronic experience with one person after another, you are the common denominator. Or more precisely, that identity that you're presenting is the common denominator. Now, I told you that each self or persona or identity must display the condition that defines it in order to be. So any self, persona, identity, valence, whatever you want to call it, will always provoke, create, attract, or completely fabricate the circumstance that defines that identity so that it can display that condition. As I listed there, that includes completely taking something out of context and just making it up to fit the complaint that that identity displays, or the the dominance over others that that identity displays, whatever it may be. To just make up an example. The person who tells the story of how they went into a store and got kicked out because they weren't wearing a mask. And this shows how these people are singling them out and picking on them. Or this shows how, the world is full of organized evil conspiracists who are trying to make lives difficult. That person is obviously displaying an identity that must be treated that way, because you listen to them and you say, dude, any of us walk into a store without a mask, that's what's going to happen. Why did you do that? And the answer is because that identity that they're displaying needed to have that story to tell in order to display the condition that defines that identity. That's the basis of it. And my point here overall being that whatever we experience, however we experience it, we create it to be experienced that way because that's what we're desiring. But there's a little curve in there you need to understand, which is that self, that identity, that persona that you're taking on is the one that will project bad experiences, things that you naturally wouldn't want to have happen, because your identities, your personas, yourselves, they need to be able to display these things. And this is why it's true that whatever you experience, some part of you desires to experience it that way, and so is attracting it, creating it, provoking it. One of the things that happens, because we're all spiritual beings, we're all connected, we all have the ability to manifest whatever it is we desire. So when you're manifesting something and it's painful, it's disturbing, well, you've got some self that wants to be able to say, look what happens to me. And just like, this is a really good analogy, Albert Einstein made the discovery, which was later proven correct, that gravity is not a large body changing the direction of other smaller bodies to attract them. Gravity is actually the curving of space, so that an object continuing in its path never diverges from that path as it seems to curve towards a larger object. That is actually space curving, because that's what gravity actually is. Same thing with ourselves, our personas. We exert this spiritual gravity that curves the flow of the universe to attract towards us whatever our identities or ourselves desire to have or experience. So the solution, when you are experiencing things that you really don't want to experience, is to resolve, unravel, and process and rid yourself of the selves or identities that must attract undesirable experiences in order to display having that condition, to be that identity. Yes, I have the techniques for doing this. I have the techniques for resolving any chronic, unwanted condition, sensation, or feeling through therapeutic spiritual counseling. I have these techniques, which is not to say there aren't other techniques, which is not to say that there couldn't be better techniques. But why do I use the techniques I use? Because in all my years of observation and work, I'm always evolving, and I'm always using whatever I find to be most direct and most effective and most actually easy to use. I don't believe that processing in spiritual sessions should ever be work, should ever require you having to work hard against something. That itself is a projection, and it's something to process if that's what you're projecting. So if you recognize what I'm talking about in yourself, and I'm sure you do, this is the reason why, this is how it is that you're attracting and creating things that you're complaining about, because there is a part of you that is desiring these things, that needs to have these things happen or display that these things are happening in order to be what you are busy being, which is not your true self. And that is the answer to How can you say that everything I experience, I desire and create, when plainly I wouldn't want to have this painful thing or this traumatic thing? This is why, because you've taken on identities that show this kind of existence. They're dramatic, they get empathy, they get attention, whatever it is, whatever is the purpose for maintaining that identity, and that needs to be unraveled. I can help you with that. Now, hopefully, you understand the truth of whatever you're experiencing. You're desiring to experience it, and you're creating it, albeit through a self that is not really who you are, that has been imposed on you, and that you've taken on. Come see me, and let's get to work on these things.